Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting part 2 of an exciting new series. What if Deku had reality warping quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by Whispic on archiveofourown.org. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. When announced the annual Career Outreach Initiative, Aizawa's first thought was absolutely not. When the assignment list hit his inbox and he saw Midoriya Izuku, Aldera Middle School, his second thought was, oh, hell no. He marched to Nizu's office, opened the door without knocking, and said flatly, "You're sending him to the school that tried to kill him." Nizu just blinked, sipping tea with unnerving calm. Who better to show them what real heroism looks like? Izuku is vengeance in a cloak. Nizu smiled. Precisely. 8 Faculty group chat problem_dad. He's going to Aldera Misty. Is this legal, Scrome? We're sending a post-traumatic genius back to his trauma site with a microphone recovery girl. Has anyone briefed the faculty at Aldera Power Loader? Should we alert the police, Nizu? Pawprints the children must learn Pawprints problem_dad. He's grounded after this, Scrome. Again. Problem_dad. Permanently 10 o'clock a.m. Aldera Middle School Gymnasium. The gym had barely changed since Izuku last saw it, a relic of childhood memories, now a stage for something much bigger. Same gray walls, dull and unyielding, flickering fluorescent lights casting uneven, flickering shadows. Same creaky wooden stage with that battered podium, weathered and leaning slightly to the side, where Izuku had once watched bullies knock kids off, laughter echoing as innocence was lost. Now he stepped onto it in his full view. A jacket, cloak flowing behind him like a banner of someone taller, older, less tired. The students looked up, eyes wide and wary, some filled with awe, others suspicion, a few trembling with fear, and some, strangely, worship. Some recognized him, some didn't. Izuku looked out across the sea of faces, an ocean of uncertainty, and felt the weight of the moment settle like a heavy stone in his chest. He cleared his throat, the sound loud and clear in the quiet room. "My name is Midoriya Izuku," he announced, voice steady but gentle, cutting through the silence. "I'm a second year at UA." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I used to sit where you sit now." Another pause, thick and heavy, like the pause before a storm. "And I'm going to tell you something no adult here ever told me." 10:03 a.m. The speech: you don't have to be powerful to deserve safety. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to break yourself to fit into a world that refuses to bend for you. His voice softened, yet every word carried weight, an anchor in turbulent waters. When they told me I was quirkless, they told me I'd never matter. They said my dreams were dangerous, that I was asking for pain just by trying. His eyes flickered with memories, pain, hope, defiance. They were wrong. You're not too much. You're not enough. You are already worthy, even if no one claps for you right now. A hush settled over the room, thick, expectant, like the calm before a storm. Then a tiny voice, trembling but brave. "Did they make fun of you here?" Izuku smiled, small, sharp like a blade. "Every day," he replied softly. "Did you fight back?" He met the question with a calm that belied the storm inside. "I survived, and then I surpassed." 10:15 a.m. The uprising had started small, just a handful of kids standing, hesitant, tentative. Then more, and suddenly, a wave of applause, raw, uncoordinated, filled with genuine emotion, like chaos with a purpose, like hope in motion. Some kids cried, tears slipping unbidden down cheeks they refused to wipe away. Some shouted, voices rising in defiance of despair. Someone yelled, "Screw the quirk rankings." Another, more daring, yelled, "Deku for president." A girl climbed onto a bench, voice loud and resolute. Why do we even have a guidance counselor if they told him to give up? Before anyone could stop her, a teacher reached for the mic, trembling, eyes wide with uncertainty. And in a moment of pure defiance, Izuku handed them a crumpled, slightly stained pamphlet titled, Constructive Accountability for Failing Institutions, a Student's Guide. They did not take it. Instead, the crowd grew louder, more fervent, and the chaos blossomed like a spring bloom. Hope, anger, determination all swirling together into something unstoppable. 10:30 a.m. Meanwhile, at UA, Katsuki was on the training field when his phone buzzed, a notification that made his stomach tighten. Local school reports public disturbance. Hero student caused mass emotional response. Aldera. He stared at it, expression blank. No surprise, no anger, just cold, simmering resolve. Then, without a word, he turned and left the field, shoulders squared, footsteps heavy. Power loader blinked, puzzled, watching him go. "Where the hell's he going?" he asked. Aizawa looked up from the monitor feed, voice flat and unreadable. "To commit murder or buy ice cream," he said simply. Mike, sipping his tea, choked on his drink, eyes wide. "Which one?" he asked, voice uncertain. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his temples with a tired, resigned expression. "Possibly both," he muttered, voice thick with exhaustion. 11 a.m. Parking lot showdown. Izuku was standing near the Aldera parking lot, heart pounding, an ominous rhythm echoing through his chest. He heard footsteps, heavy, angry, familiar, like a migraine emotion. Katsuki appeared, stopping 3 feet away, eyes blazing with fury, shoulders tense like a coiled spring. "You came back here alone?" Katsuki demanded, voice low but dangerous, veins bulging in his neck. Izuku met his gaze, calm, steady, almost serene, eyes unflinching. "Yes," he said softly, and gave a TED talk about institutional failure. "Roughly, yes." And started a riot. Izuku blinked, trying not to smile. "I prefer spontaneous moral clarity," he said, voice even. Katsuki grabbed his collar roughly, clenching fists, face inches from Izuku's. "I should kill you," he growled, voice dark. "You won't," Izuku replied, voice calm but firm. "Try me," Katsuki challenged, eyes narrowing to slits. "Because you were the second riot," Izuku added, voice steady. A long pause, thick with tension. Then Katsuki exhaled sharply through his nose, muttering, "You're a menace." "You say that like it's news," Izuku said softly, almost with a hint of amusement, as if this was just another day in their chaos. 12 p.m. Aizawa's office. Later. "I'm not apologizing," Izuku said calmly. "You printed flyers," Aizawa said, waving the evidence. "They ask questions. You said public trust is a smokescreen for policy failure." They clapped. Mike sat on the couch in the corner, eating trail mix and nodding like a parent at a school play. "I also have video," he added. "You had a mic echo. It was very revolutionary underground cell." Aizawa leaned forward, rubbed his temples, and muttered, "I need a vacation. Or a tranquilizer." "You can't ground him again," Mike said. "Watch me." Group chat. Debrief problem_father. He made 3 teachers cry misty. A kid bit the principal recovery girl. Izuku Midoriya. Student, activist, chaos mage power loader. Are we proud of him? Nizu. Paw Prince. He said what needed to be said. Paw Prince problem_dad. Next time he's giving a speech, I'm sending him with a muzzle. 10 p.m. Dorm rooftop. He sat alone again. But it didn't last. This time, it was Uraraka who found him first. Then Jairu. Then Ida. Then Kaminari. No one spoke for a while. Then Kaminari flopped down and said, "So, when's your next tour stop?" Izuku chuckled. "Dunno. Thinking about public libraries." Jairu hummed. "Let us know. I'll bring a sound system." "You. Planning to start a revolution?" Ida asked, eyes glinting. Izuku looked down at his hands, then up at the stars. "Not a revolution," he said softly. "Just a better beginning." Aizawa had reached the end of his rope. Again, which was saying something, considering his rope had frayed years ago, tattered and thin, caught fire once in a fit of frustration, and now just existed out of spite, hanging loosely, threatening to snap at any moment. He felt the rough texture of it in his mind, a reminder of every time he'd been pushed too far, every moment where patience had worn thin like worn fabric. His shoulders sagged, the weight of it pressing down like a dull ache behind his eyes. "I'm not asking you," he muttered, voice low and gravelly, tossing Katsuki a battered toolkit from a cluttered cart. The metal clinked sharply, echoing in the sterile, stale air. The scent of paint fumes, sharp and metallic, mingled with a faint underlying smell of burnt plastic and frustration. "And I'm not excusing you," he added, handing Izuku a clipboard, the surface cold and smooth beneath his fingertips. Izuku's eyes flicked to the clipboard, then back to Aizawa, a flood of internal questions swirling. Why now? Why like this? "You broke the hallway wall," Aizawa said, voice quiet but firm, eyes narrowing. The memory of the cracked plaster, jagged and uneven, haunted him. He could almost hear the drywall protesting under Katsuki's fist, could feel the dust still settling in the air. "You blew the dorm power grid," he continued, his tone edged with exasperation, handing Izuku the clipboard. Aizawa's gaze drifted to the flickering fluorescent light overhead, the flicker uneven and jittery, casting shadows that danced like ghostly doubts. "And now you're both fixing it. Together. Alone. Until it's done," he finished, voice like a worn-out whisper that carried the weight of unspoken disappointment. A beat of silence stretched, thick and heavy, the kind that presses against your chest, making each breath feel like a small victory. Then Aizawa turned slowly, shoulders slumped, muttering under his breath, "I should have joined the postal service." His footsteps echoed softly as he walked away, the sound swallowed by the quiet hum of the flickering lights. 3 p.m. Dorm utility wing, storage room 2B. The air was thick with the scent of paint, a sickly sweet odor that clung to the back of the throat, mingling with the sharp tang of guilt, like the metallic taste of regret lingering on the tongue. The fluorescent bulb above sputtered intermittently, casting a sickly yellow glow that flickered like a dying candle, adding a terrible, accusatory ambience to the scene. In the corner, a fuse box set open on the wall, wires exposed like nerves laid bare. Nearby, a section of plaster hung half-detached, jagged and ragged, resembling a wound waiting desperately to be stitched up. Dust motes floated lazily in the stale air, disturbed only by the faint scrape of tools and the occasional sigh of frustration. Izuku stood near the circuit panel, his hoodie pulled over his head, a tool belt strapped awkwardly over his shoulders, the metal clinking softly with each shift of his posture. His fingers trembled faintly as they hovered over the wires, the sensation of cold metal grounding him, yet the internal storm of anxiety threatened to spill over. Katsuki leaned against a half-built shelf, arms crossed, his face sharp and unreadable, eyes glinting with irritation. His breathing was slow, deliberate, the faint scent of sweat and burnt RBB clinging to him. Neither spoke. Their silence was thick, heavy with a mutual agreement to stew in their irritation, clinging to it like a shield. Finally, Katsuki's voice cut through the quiet like a razor. "You always overdo it," he snapped, voice rough and edged with frustration, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. Izuku didn't look up from the tangled wires. His mind raced, trying to drown out the sharpness of Katsuki's tone, focusing instead on the faint hum of the circuitry, the slight warmth of the metal tools in his hands. "I was explaining the limitations of hero hierarchies," he murmured, voice tentative, as if testing the waters of Katsuki's patience. "To middle schoolers." Katsuki's voice was incredulous, almost dismissive. "I was asked to inspire them," Izuku replied, voice even but strained, the words feeling hollow. Katsuki scoffed, a harsh sound, the kind that made the air seem to tighten. "You started a mutiny." Izuku shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips, tinged with exhaustion. "Maybe they needed one." 3:20 p.m. The paint situation. Katsuki tugged open a can of off-white wall paint with a violence that made the lid jump and clatter to the floor, rolling lazily under a nearby table like a defeated soldier. His jaw clenched, hands trembling slightly with the effort to contain his temper. Izuku didn't flinch at the noise, only watching intently, a faint smirk playing on his lips as he observed Katsuki's frustration. "Why does this color have a name?" Katsuki muttered, voice raspy with irritation, eyes narrowing as he stared at the label. Izuku leaned closer, reading aloud, "Reformed Ivory." His voice was soft, almost amused. Katsuki snorted, a bitter sound. "Because marketing is a lie." Izuku nodded solemnly, eyes flickering with understanding. "Just like the hero billboard charts," he said quietly, voice thoughtful. Katsuki froze, the anger in his posture melting into a scowl. "Stop doing that," he muttered. "Doing what?" "Agreeing with me." Katsuki's tone was sharp, but his eyes flickered with something unspoken, acknowledgement, maybe, or a grudging respect. 3:45 p.m. The accident. Katsuki grabbed the paint tray, balancing it precariously on a box that looked unstable, the kind that creaked ominously under slight pressure. His grip was tight, knuckles white with effort. He turned too quickly, an explosion of motion, and the box shifted. The tray teetered, tipped, and in a slow, inevitable arc, spilled a gallon of reformed ivory down Izuku's left arm. Izuku blinked, wide-eyed, as the cold paint sloshed over his skin, dripping in thick, gloppy streams. He looked down, watching the white goose spread across his hoodie, smearing like a stain of defeat. He slowly looked up at Katsuki, eyes dark with disbelief and irritation. "You owe me a new hoodie," Izuku said, voice flat yet tinged with a hint of dry humor. Katsuki deadpanned, expression blank. "You shouldn't wear funeral clothes to do manual LBR." Izuku licked a drop of paint off his knuckle, his gaze distant. "Good to know you're capable of remorse." Katsuki's voice was cold, almost dismissive. "Die." Eventually, Izuku murmured, a faint smirk curling at his lips. 4:15 p.m. Silence and sandpaper. They worked side by side, the air thick with the gritty scent of dust and the faint metallic tang of the wires they pulled apart. Every scrape of sandpaper on old drywall was a small, repetitive prayer, a ritual of renewal. Until, "You remember Aldera's gym?" Katsuki asked, voice casual but carrying an undercurrent of nostalgia. Izuku glanced sideways, wary. "Of course. You used to sit in the third row. Last seat. By the door." Izuku stiffened, memories flashing, of the cool, slick floor beneath his sneakers, the smell of chalk and sweat, the distant roar of the crowd. "You always walked out last." "Every demand day," Katsuki said softly, almost regretfully. Izuku's voice was quiet, almost defensive. "I was trying not to be noticed." "You failed." Katsuki's tone was flat, but his eyes held a flicker of something unreadable. A pause, the weight of unspoken truths pressing between them. "I wasn't trying to make you look bad," Izuku whispered. "I know." Silence swallowed them again, thick and heavy. Then Katsuki muttered, "I was a coward." Izuku blinked, startled. "You weren't scared of being weak." "I was, and I made you suffer for it." 4:30 p.m. The shift the wall was mostly finished, dust motes swirling lazily in the dim light, settling like forgotten memories. The silence was no longer sharp but tired, worn thin by effort and emotion. Izuku sat cross-legged on the floor, hoodie streaked with white and gray, paint, dust, and exhaustion. Katsuki leaned against the frame, sweat dampening his hair, the scent of metal and exertion lingering around him. Izuku didn't look at him when he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. "You caught me." Katsuki didn't deny it. "I would again," Katsuki replied, voice hoarse but steady. "I never should have pushed you to dash." He paused and sucked in a breath. "I never should have treated you the way I did. I'm glad you were still here." A pause. "That's not forgiveness," Izuku said softly. Katsuki's voice was hoarse with emotion, almost a whisper. "I'm not asking for it." Longer pause. "But maybe I'm earning it." 5 p.m. Return to Aizawa. The hallway lights flickered on with a faint buzz as the newly repaired fuse clicked into place. The fluorescent glow was steadier, brighter, casting the corridor in a clinical white. Izawa stood at the end of the hall, eyes fixed on the door, watching silently, the faint lines of fatigue etched into his face, yet somehow relieved. "You finished?" he asked, voice low but steady. They both nodded, silent. "You talk." Neither answered. He sighed, a heavy breath that seemed to carry the weight of all his frustrations. "Good. Maybe next time you'll break less infrastructure when you're emotionally constipated." Izuku raised a hand, sheepish. "I learned how to repair a junction box." Katsuki grunted, smirking faintly. "I learned your voice echoes in drywall." Izawa blinked, caught off guard. "I hate this school." His words hung in the air, a shared truth, a fragile acknowledgement of the chaos and hope woven into the fabric of their broken, repaired world. Ferret finder. Calm problem_father. Izuku came back covered in paint misty, and Katsuki was quiet. Recovery girl, their healing power loader, or trauma bonding Nizu. Paw prints either way, walls are fixed paw prints problemer for dad. I'm charging him for the paint 10 p.m. Dorm rooftop. Izuku was back in fresh clothes. Hoodie zipped, socks mismatched. He stared at the stars. Katsuki sat down next to him with a grunt. "I'm not good at this." "I know, but I'm trying." Izuku didn't say anything. He just bumped their shoulders together. Not a truce, but maybe an understanding. It was Uraraka's idea. A spark in her eyes, a whisper of mischief shimmering behind her usual bubbly cheer. "We never do anything fun as a class," she'd said, voice bright and eager, like a flame catching wind. "We need a game night," she'd insisted, hands gesturing wildly, her smile infectious. "We'll invite Midoriya too," she'd added with a playful wink, the corners of her mouth turning upward, eyes twinkling with anticipation. And like moths drawn to a flickering, unstable power grid, an energy that was definitely not up to code, Class 1A said yes. By 8 p.m., the common room was a chaotic tapestry of disorder. The floor was littered with snack wrappers crumpled like discarded dreams, soda cans crushed and dented, their metallic surfaces catching the dim light. Various cursed card decks, some old, some battered, were sprawled across tables and cushions, their edges frayed from too many battles. Someone had rigged fairy lights across the ceiling, casting a soft, warm glow that flickered unevenly, like a heartbeat. Kaminari had brought music, loud, upbeat, and slightly out of sync, until Jairu, with a pointed look, flicked it off, silencing the room with a decisive click. And right there in the middle of it all, calm, quiet, with laminated rules in hand, sat Izuku Midoriya. His face was a picture of concentration, like he was mentally mapping a strategy despite the chaos around him. 8:02 p.m. The seating plan in the room was a mosaic of personalities. Kaminari sprawled across a beanbag, limbs akimbo, like a golden retriever basking in Wi-Fi's warmth, his hair a messy halo of yellow. Jairu leaned against the couch, earbuds half in, her eyes flicking between the game and her music, a faint smirk playing on her lips, like she was half listening, half judging the madness around her. Ida sat bolt upright on a floor cushion, his back straight and rigid, a pristine rules pamphlet carefully folded in his hands, as if it were a sacred scroll. Mineta lounged, with a confidence that seemed almost reckless, like he was a king surveying his kingdom, unaware or uncaring of the storm of disapproval brewing beneath his surface. Uraraka sat cross-legged, bouncing slightly with glee, her cheeks flushed, eyes shining with anticipation. Izuku, in the middle, settled between Ida and Juru, eyeing the Uno deck like it might explode at any moment, his brow furrowed, internal calculations whirling behind his eyes. He hesitated, voice hesitant. "I haven't played this since," he began, voice soft and distant, as if recalling a fragile memory. "Since when?" Uraraka asked, leaning in, her smile eager and supportive. He looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "Since childhood joy was possible." A beat of silence, thick and contemplative, as if everyone was processing the weight of that simple statement. Then Kaminari clapped his hands loudly, breaking the spell. "Okay, Let's do this. 8:06 p.m. The first round of the game started with a gentle shuffle, cards sliding across the table, a soft whisper of paper on paper. Draw, pass, reverse, skip. Laughter spilled into the room, warm and bright, bouncing off the walls like sunlight through a window. Even Izuku, cautious at first, cracked a hesitant smile, his shoulders relaxing, tension easing from his face with each sarcastic shout and playful tease. He played with a quiet precision, like a scientist conducting an experiment, calculating every move, analyzing the psychological warfare hidden in each discard pile. His brow furrowed, eyes narrowing as he studied the opponent's expressions, trying to read their next move like a chess MSTR. By the second round, Gyro leaned over, whispering to Kaminari with a sly grin. He's not playing the game. He is the game. Kaminari's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of admiration and awe. 8:14 p.m. Minetta's mistake had happened during round 3. Kaminari threw down a +4 card, the colors bright and obnoxious, an assault on the senses. Minetta, with a challenge and a smug grin, dodged it, his eyes gleaming as if daring the universe to challenge him further. While shuffling his hand, he muttered, "Can't believe we're spending our night pretending therapy works." The room fell into a tense silence, a moment frozen in time, like a camera zooming in on a pivotal scene. Izuku, still smiling, placed his card gently on the discard pile. It was a wild card, black, the color of midnight, of unspoken secrets. Gyro blinked, confused. That's not a color." Izuku leaned slightly forward, his expression calm, almost unnervingly so. "Minoru," he said softly, voice even measured. "Do you say things like that to avoid confronting your own inability to regulate intimacy, or do you just think being performatively dismissive will get you attention?" Minetta blinked, stunned. He began, voice faltering. Izuku pressed on, voice flat and measured, like a scientist explaining a theory. Because statistically, people who trivialize emotional support systems either grew up without them or weaponize performative detachment to avoid examining their own internalized insecurity. Kaminari whispered, voice trembling with amusement and concern. "Oh no, he brought stats." Izuku placed another card, skip. "I'm skipping your ability to deflect." Another card, reverse. "I'm turning the conversation back to your coping mechanisms." And finally, +4. "Unpack that. Emotionally." Minetta stared at his hand, then at the group. His face blanched, a mixture of embarrassment and defiance. He slowly stood, eyes darting around. I need water," he muttered, voice trembling. He turned and, with exaggerated slow motion, walked out of the room. Kaminari muttered, almost under his breath, "I think he needs an exorcism." 8:20 p.m. The aftermath. Gyro was crying with laughter, tears streaming down her face in uncontrollable giggles. Ida sat frozen, a single Uno card clutched mid-play, eyes wide and unblinking, as if he'd seen something unutterably profound. Uraraka was hiding behind a pillow, muffling her giggles with a muffled squeal. Izuku sipped his tea quietly, a faint smile on his lips, as if he'd just completed some quiet victory. "I'm not wrong," he said softly, voice unwavering. "No," Gyro wheezed, wiping tears from her eyes. "You're not. You're just so clinical about it. I'm emotionally literate. You're a human spreadsheet with trauma formatting." Izuku blinked, caught off guard, then smiled warmly. "Thank you." 8:45 p.m. Truth or dare? Why would you? Because chaos demands escalation. Kaminari grinned mischievously. "Let's do truth or dare." The room, already buzzing with energy, grew even more chaotic. "Truth," Gyro said, eyes glinting. "Would you ever date someone in this room?" Kaminari asked, voice playful but probing. Gyro hesitated, then glanced at Izuku, her cheeks flushing faintly. "Maybe," she replied, then immediately fake coughed to cover her nervousness. "Dare," Ida said, voice steady. Uraraka dared him to remove his glasses, a challenge that sparked a collective gasp, almost starting a riot of protests and laughter. When it was Izuku's turn, someone, Kaminari, blurted, "Truth, would you date Bakugo?" The room went silent, the air thick with anticipation. Izuku didn't flinch, his expression calm and steady. "I would date someone who challenged me to be better and still caught me when I fell." A beat. Kaminari, softly, "Bro, that's a yes." 9:30 p.m. Winding down, they didn't play much after that. Kaminari started a playlist, music flooding the room, Jiru letting it run as a soundtrack to their chaos. Uraraka braided part of Ida's hair with glitter string, her giggles bubbling out softly. Izuku helped Mineta come back from his existential spiral, handing him a one-page document titled, "You're not broken, just misaligned. Try again." Mineta cried a little, silent tears of relief, perhaps. No one mocked him. No one judged. Just a quiet, shared understanding of their messy chaos. Shavocado FRE Yellow. Game night success. PURRR plea. Izuka unoed Mineta's soul recovery girl. Healing is happening Nizu. Pawprints bonding achieved. Trauma processed. Progress made. Pawprints power loader. I would like a transcript sigh. If they invite him to karaoke, I'm burning the machine 11 p.m. Dorm rooftop. Izuku sat with his knees to his chest, watching the moon. Jiru joined him quietly. "You scare people," she said softly. "I know, but you also make them feel seen." Izuku didn't respond. Then, with a tiny, tired smile, he said, "I used to think I had to disappear to survive. And now I think maybe I just have to show up." The common room of Heights Alliance had never been so meticulously rearranged. Chairs had been shoved to the walls, a string of LED fairy lights wound around the curtain rods and ceiling beams like glowing veins of anxiety. The snack table in the corner was a dangerous pile of sugar and salt, and Kaminari had successfully hacked together a karaoke setup using 2 Bluetooth speakers, a spare mic, and what might have once been Nizu's voice synthesizer. At the center of it all stood Uraraka, holding a clipboard like the host of a very sparkly apocalypse. "Tonight," she announced with a grin, "is about joy, bonding, and completely embarrassing yourselves in front of your peers." Kaminari raised his drink and shouted, "Let's go emotional collapse." Jiru was already halfway into the wall, pretending to be part of the architecture, and Izuku, standing awkwardly near the snack table, looked like he wanted to evaporate. 8:10 p.m. Izuku tries and fails. To leave, he made it 3 steps toward the exit. That's when Ida appeared like a polite ghost with jet boosters. "Midoriya," he said, tone chipper but firm, "surely you won't abandon us in a time of collective vulnerability." "I was just, checking on the power grid," Izuku offered. Ida pointed to the perfectly functioning lights. Izuku's eyes darted to Jiru for support. She was adjusting the AUX cord and didn't even glance over. "Ida," Izuku tried again, "I'm really more of a moral support kind of dash. Moral support involves supporting morale," Ida declared, steering him gently back inside with the same force he used for public safety lectures. Izuku sighed. "This is emotional entrapment." "Exactly," Ida beamed. 8:30 p.m. The chaos begins. Kaminari started with a high-pitched, off-key rendition of a pop song that involved too much hip motion and a wireless mic with zero mercy. Jiru covered her face with her hands. Uraraka laughed until she had to clutch her stomach. Ida gave an encouraging standing ovation. Then came Sato and Kirishima with a duet that involved air drums and deep commitment. Someone turned off the lights to enhance the mood. It made it worse. Or better. Then Izuku, Jiru said, nudging his arm. "You're up." Izuku choked on his soda. "No, I'm not even in the lineup." "You are now." She held out a folded slip of paper, written in neat Sharpie across the top. "Midoriya song. Famous last words, MCR." He blinked. "That's incredibly specific." Jiru raised a brow. "You sang it under your breath for 2 weeks after that one ethics class meltdown." He stared at her. She shrugged. "You hum loud, Midoriya." 8:45 p.m. The performance. The lights dimmed. The room fell quiet. Izuku stepped onto the makeshift stage, gripping the mic like it might vanish. His cloak, which he hadn't meant to wear tonight, but hadn't taken off either, swayed lightly behind him as if caught in a draft no one else felt. The opening guitar riff played. Raw. Familiar. He took one breath, then another. When he began, his voice wasn't perfect. It was rough, low at first, shaky with the weight of someone used to speaking to rooms full of people, but not for himself. I am not afraid to keep on living. The words came like broken glass, smoothed over by time. His voice grew steadier, pushed by something quieter than confidence, conviction. I'm not afraid to walk this world alone. By the second verse, his shoulders had squared. His feet planted. His voice rang out, not trained, not polished, but achingly clear. Nothing you can say can stop me going home. No one laughed. No one moved. Jairu's eyes were wide. Kaminari had his hand over his mouth. Ida stood rigid, hand hovering like he might applaud before it was over. When Izuku hit the chorus again, he leaned forward, eyes half closed, hand tightening around the mic. I see you lying next to me / with words I thought I'd never speak / awake and unafraid. Asleep or dead. There was nothing gentle in his voice now. Just honesty, and pain, and survival, and the quiet triumph of someone who had lived through things most people don't walk away from and chose to stand back up. And then, as the final chords rang out, a voice joined in. 8:49 p.m. The Katsuki entrance from the hallway. Sharp, low, seamless, like he'd known the lyrics his whole life and was just waiting to explode them out. I am not afraid to keep on living / Every head in the room turned. Katsuki Bakugu stepped into the common room like a warning. No uniform jacket, just black sweats and a hoodie with sleeves pushed up. Hair wild, scowl in place, and a voice like thunder just barely controlled. I'm not afraid to walk this world alone / Izuku's eyes widened. He didn't stop singing, didn't flinch. They stood 10 feet apart, facing each other like a duel, singing like they were the only ones in the room. Nothing you can say can stop me going home / And there, in that last chorus, they harmonized. Messily, beautifully, like two kids who'd screamed at each other their whole lives and somehow still learned how to echo. 9 p.m. Silence. The song ended. The mic buzzed in a hush. No one spoke. Then Kaminari stood, clapped. Once, twice. Then everyone did. Uraraka cried a little. Jairu recorded the whole thing and uploaded it to a private drive labeled Emotional Blackmail for later. Ito wiped his glasses and said, I did not know explosions could sing. And Katsuki, for once, didn't say anything. He just walked to the door, paused, and muttered without looking back, You're still off-key. Izuku smiled. I'll take it. Back at it again, at Chris Cream Yellow, he sang. With him, Purrr plea. They harmonized like war criminals recovery girl. I cried into my T-Power loader. Are we sure they're not dating Sai? He isn't allowed to date until he's 40 Nizu. Paw prints, they are becoming a force. Paw prints Sai. They better not be dating Sai. I'm unplugging the karaoke machine, Scrim. In lowercase, he came in on the second verse yellow. He's been waiting. Sai. Therapy. Both of you. Now. Scrim. In lowercase, oh so, is this another case of do as I say, not as I do? Sai. Midoriya Izuku Yellow. Oh my god, Purrr plea. Full government name. Recovery girl. They'll get the bed prep power loader. So should I be worried? Yellow. Worse yellow. You should be scared 11 p.m. Dorm rooftop. Izuku sat alone again. Hoodie pulled tight, voice still raw from singing. He didn't expect the footsteps. He definitely didn't expect Katsuki to sit beside him again. You didn't miss a beat, Izuku said softly. Katsuki looked up at the stars. Didn't want to. A pause. Then, you were loud. You were louder. They didn't talk after that. But for once, they didn't have to. It started like most catastrophes at UA, with a deceptively cheerful email. Subject line, Graduation Cap UA, Student Peer Insight Initiative, congratulations, Midoriya, Izuku. Graduation Cap attached. A formal letter from Principal Nizu. Pristine and stiff, the words glowing softly on the screen. Effective immediately, you are now granted the status of Peer Insight Liaison. Your observations and reports will be given direct faculty review. Please use this power wisely and judiciously, or don't. Paw prints. Izuku stared at his laptop, face blank, but eyes widening slightly, a slow, creeping disbelief. The words felt like a punch, absurd, terrifying, and somehow sinister. He turned, eyes drifting past the cluttered chaos of his room, his mostly unused printer, tangled cords, a small mountain of half-formed assignments, and back to the screen. His voice cracked out, almost a whisper, trembling with a strange mixture of awe and dread. He gave me clearance. Behind him, Kaminari squeaked, a high-pitched sound of surprise, then darted behind the couch, muffling a nervous giggle as if trying to disappear into the shadows. 9 a.m. Class 1A homeroom. Izuku entered carrying a manila folder labeled Week 1, Social Risk Index. The moment he stepped in, the room fell silent, like a SWCH had been flipped. He stopped dead in front of the chalkboard, instinctively taping up a chaotic behavior flowchart, color-coded index cards fluttering and fluttering, like wounded birds trying to escape. Each card represented a different student's hidden emotional wounds, social risks, unspoken fears. Uraraka blinked, eyes wide and curious. "What is that?" She wanted to ask, but her voice was caught somewhere between excitement and confusion. Izuku's voice was eerily calm, almost robotic in its certainty. "I've been promoted. I have jurisdiction now." Mineta snorted, loud and cruel, a jagged burst of sound that sliced through the tension. "Jurisdiction? You sound like a villain fanboy." Izuku slowly turned, eyes cold and calculating, like a glacier considering vengeance, a slow, deliberate calm that made everyone freeze. "Minoru," he said softly, voice like a whisper of steel, "your name already has a folder." He tapped his binder with a heavy thud. "And a backup." Mineta's grin faltered, the bravado slipping away into something more fragile, more uncertain. Across the room, Ida sat taller, shoulders squared, eyes sharp with suspicion and something darker lurking beneath. Kaminari whispered, voice trembling with a mixture of awe and dread. "He's going to destroy him legally." Jairu cracked her knuckles, a slow, satisfying creak, then muttered, "Good." 11:15 a.m. Staff lounge, emotional ambush. Aizawa was mid-coffee, steam curling from his mug, scarf wrapped around his neck like a slumbering serpent. One socked foot rested lazily on the table, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Across from him, Mike sat with a brightly colored bento, a grin that hinted at trouble, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Then the door swung open, and Izuku entered with purpose, clutching a folder like a secret weapon. "Unresolved emotional tension between faculty members 1A01, he announced, sliding the folder onto the table with a definitive thud that made the room tense. Mike blinked, confused. "What is, I'm intervening," Izuku said, voice unwavering, like a verdict from the depths of his chaotic, analytical mind. Aizawa blinked once, slow and deliberate, eyes narrowing. "Why now?" "You're both miserable," Izuku stated bluntly, voice flat but piercing. Mike choked, spluttering his tea as if the words had physically struck him. "You," Izuku pointed directly at Aizawa, "are emotionally repressed." Aizawa's face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered with something, annoyance, frustration, a flicker of something unspoken. "Correct," he muttered. "And you," pointing at Mike, "use jokes to hide attachment and security." Mick's eyes widened, surprise and defiance flickering in his gaze, but Izuku wasn't finished. "You love each other." The table went silent, stunned, frozen, like a collective gasp hung in the air, suspended and heavy. Izuku opened the folder, revealing graphs, mission logs, handwritten notes, Uraraka's concern, Kaminari's fan art, their awkward, embarrassed expressions captured forever. Mike squinted, voice trembling. "Wait, is that us kissing? Focus!" Izuku snapped, voice sharp as a blade. Aizawa rubbed his face, eyes closing briefly. voice dry and resigned. Why now? Because the children can sense it. And I'm one of the children. Mike sniffled, voice hoarse, trembling. You're really doing this. I am too young to be emotionally co-parented by two people who haven't even admitted they're in love, Izuku said flatly, voice trembling with a strange mixture of irritation, hope, and chaos. Aizawa stared, darkening. His eyes looked like storm clouds gathering. Mike sniffled again, voice hoarse. Izuku, you appealing chaos demon. 1 p.m. Training field observation. It was a simple drill, rescue extraction, mid-range targets, nothing fancy. Izuku, clipboard in hand, supervised with an intensity that made the air crackle. When Mineta failed the second maneuver, Izuku called over, voice steady but firm. Try again. Focus on your timing. Loud. Sharp. Too loud. Mineta snapped, voice venomous and biting. Why don't you focus on minding your own DMN business, teacher's pet? Or is this just another way to get off on control? The words hit like a cold splash of water, shocking and brutal. Half the class stopped, eyes wide and frozen, holding their breath. Jairu's jaw clenched so tightly her teeth threatened to grind through. Kaminari froze, eyes so wide with shock that it looked like his brain had short-circuited. Izuku. He didn't move. He didn't respond. He just looked at Mineta, silent, heavy like the storm before the thunder, long, slow, and deliberate. Then, without a word, he turned and walked off the field, slow and measured, as if dragging the weight of the universe behind him. He returned with a second folder, like a shield or a weapon. 1:15 p.m. Staff office. Aizawa, Izuku, and the envelope hit the desk with a dull, ominous thud, heavy with consequences. Aizawa stared at it, then at Izuku's face, tight, cold, restrained, like a dam holding back a flood. He said nothing. Izuku's voice was flat, dangerous, tight. He's crossed the line. Repeatedly. For months. He opened the folder. Inside, timestamps, complaints, screenshots, 2 audio recordings, 1 tear-streaked note from a student Mineta had cornered last week. Aizawa's jaw clenched, muscle twitching. Mike stepped inside, saw the folder, and softly asked, is this happening? Izuku said nothing. He didn't have to. 3 p.m. Administrative meeting. Not seen by students. Principal Nizu sat at the head of the table, reading the report with slow, deliberate care. His paws folded patiently, eyes dark with disappointment. When he finished, he set the paper down with a sigh, voice quiet but heavy with resolve. I'm deeply disappointed in myself, that it took a student to protect the others. The room was suffocating in silence, thick, oppressive, unrelenting, until the decision was made. The vote was unanimous. Mineta Minoru was expelled, blacklisted from hero internships, erased from the roster with no fanfare, no warning, just cold, brutal silence. There was only the folder and the echo of what had been lost. Chicken strips per our plea. He vaporized them yellow, like emotionally and legally power loader. Kid walked in with receipts and a power stance recovery girl. I'm proud and horrified, Nizu. Paw Princey did what needed to be done, Paw Prince I. He's not grounded anymore, I'm free. Thank you, Yellow. He called US out on being in love, I'm free. Please confess before finals. I'm begging you. 11 p.m. Dorm rooftop. Izuku sat again, knees drawn up, hoodie pulled tight, wind tugging at the hem. Jairu arrived quietly, then Uraraka. Kaminari dropped next to them with 2 granola bars. They didn't talk about it. Not the expulsion, not the field, not the folder. But Jairu nudged aside and said, you did good. Uraraka added, we feel safer. Kaminari leaned back, hand behind his head. You know, he said, I think of the reason you still works. Izuku smiled faintly. I just tell the truth. No, Jairu said. You carry it. The ethics and leadership room was tucked away in a quiet corner of the topmost academic tower, accessible only by retinal scan and one very old stairwell that creaked like it was hiding secrets. It wasn't a classroom. It was a greenhouse study, ringed with polished wood, wide glass windows that turned storm clouds into moving watercolor paintings, and soft lighting that shimmered like liquid gold. A pot of jasmine tea steamed gently on a warmer, its scent delicate and intoxicating, floating through the air like a fragile promise. The books lining the shelves were not about quirks or combat. They were about systems, philosophy, and identity, deep, tangled, and impossible to pin down. And in the center, like a misplaced cartoon in a monastery, sat Principal Nizu, claws folded over a thick academic journal, eyes gleaming with a mischievous intelligence that made the room feel both safe and dangerous. He looked up as Izuku entered, his smile snapping shut like a trap. "Ah, my favorite unpredictable variable." Izuku blinked, caught off guard. "I thought that was Kaminari." "Unpredictable and aware," Nizu corrected smoothly, gesturing to the seat across from him, the chair creaking as if it, too, was eager to listen. Izuku hesitated, then sat, setting his notebook carefully on the table. His cloak was folded neatly behind him, gloves taken off, hands resting on his lap. No armor, no defenses, just the bare vulnerability of someone who's already fought too many battles in silence. 10:12 a.m. Teeth and truth, today's prompt, Nizu said cheerfully, voice lilting like a breeze through autumn leaves, is perspective. He slid a slip of paper across the table. "How do you see change?" Izuku stared at it, the words shimmering in the soft light, and felt the weight of the question settle over him like a storm cloud. He hesitated, then softly replied, slow. Nizu tilted his head, eyes twinkling. "But inevitable." "No," Izuku said, brows drawing together, voice quieter now, edged with something darker. "Hard-earned." He leaned back, voice slow and measured, like a river carving through stone. "When I was 13, I thought change happened when people saw the truth, when the facts lined up, when pain was visible, when justice was loud enough. And now, I think change happens when people realize they're not allowed to stay the same anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and thick as fog, swirling with the chaos of unspoken fears, of hope and despair tangled together. 10:27 a.m. Katsuki. Then and now Nizu poured tea with one paw, the liquid shimmering as if it carried secrets. Izuku held his cup but didn't drink, the warmth passing through his fingers like a pulse of memories. "Katsuki," Nizu said gently, not a question, just a name that carried the weight of years. Izuku exhaled, soft and slow, like a release of tension he'd been holding in for too long. "When we were kids," he whispered, voice low, "I thought I'd either die trying to be his friend or survive just long enough to forget I ever was." He let the words sit, raw and trembling, in the quiet space between them. Nizu didn't interrupt, letting the ache linger. But he was never just loud. Izuku continued, voice trembling with a mixture of pain and understanding. He was scared. He still is. And for a long time, he thought hurting first was the only way to stop other people from seeing it. And now, Izuku looked out the window, the city sprawled beneath them, alive, breathing, unpredictable. "He's trying," he said softly, "and I can see him in ways I could not before. I'm not scared of him, but I'm scared for him." "Why?" "Because he loves like he fights, wild, instinctive. And I do not think he knows how to survive what comes after the battle's over." His voice cracked, fragile as glass. 10:40 a.m. The distance Nizu set down his cup gently, as if weighing the importance of what he was about to say. "You're both carrying old versions of each other," he said simply, voice calm but heavy with understanding. Izuku nodded slowly, tracing the edge of the table with one finger, the creak of the wood echoing softly in the quiet room. "I still flinch when he yells," he admitted softly, "and he still watches me like I'm going to vanish." A beat of silence, thick and oppressive. "And when we were close, when we were really close, it feels like I'm talking to the ghost of someone I forgave, someone who still hasn't forgiven himself." Nizu folded his paws together, eyes gentle but piercing. "And yet you moved toward him." "I always will," Izuku whispered, voice trembling with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "Why?" Izuku did not hesitate, the chaos within him spilling out in a quiet confession. Because the first person I ever wanted to be saved by was him. Nizu clasped his paws together, mirth sparkling in his eyes. I think I know how we can get around your father's no dating until you're 40 rule. 10:58 a.m. Leadership. They shifted gears, the atmosphere thickening as Nizu's tone grew more serious, more deliberate. He spoke of history, resistance, the burden of voice, the silent weight of leadership. Izuku responded, sometimes aloud, sometimes in scribbles, sometimes in silence, each expression revealing more than words ever could. Before the hour ended, Nizu closed his journal, his voice soft but resolute. Leadership is not always about pulling people forward. Izuku looked up, eyes searching. Sometimes, Nizu said, it's about staying still long enough for others to catch up, to believe they're worth walking beside you. And somewhere in that moment, the boy who once sat at the back of Alder's class, fists clenched, eyes too wide, began to transform. Someone else. Someone real. Someone still afraid, but no longer alone. 11:05 a.m. Leaving the tower, Izuku's footsteps creaked softly as he descended the staircase, each step heavy with unspoken weight. When he reached the ground floor, the noise of the school returned, the laughter, shouts, the pounding of training rounds echoing through the halls. He hesitated at the door, cloak wrapped tightly around him, letting the memory of the tower linger like the last bitter sip of tea on his tongue. He thought of Katsuki. The last time he saw him, shoulders tense, mouth set, eyes burning not with rage, but with restraint, like a volcano holding back an eruption. Izuku closed his eyes, feeling the sharp ache of unspoken words. Then he opened them and stepped toward the light, into whatever chaos awaited outside. 7 a.m. The announcement the final exam format was posted on the Class 1A board before homeroom. Live 2-on, 2 sparring match against upperclassmen. Real field terrain. No safety net. It was signed, simply, Aizawa, and also Nizu, but mostly Aizawa. Uraraka squinted. This feels personal. It always is, Kaminari said grimly. Ida adjusted his gloves. We must meet this challenge with poise, and Kirishima walked in. Bakugu and Midoriya are on opposing teams. The room went silent. Jiru dropped her pencil. Group chat. Class 1A plus Izuku. Title, Chaos and Therapy. Kaminari. Izuku and Bakugu on opposite teams. Again. Jiru. I'm bringing snacks. And a first aid kit. Uraraka. This is the emotional equivalent of throwing a lit match in a gasoline Ida. Language aside, yes. Kirishima. Who we betting gets emotionally compromised first hecker. I can see this chat. Kaminari. Yeah, and we are watching you too. Ferret King Juru. Please confess before finals. I don't want to see a slow-motion punch-dodge cry again, Ferret kind. I do not plan on crying, Uraraka. You never plan on crying. And yet, 12 p.m. Training grounds Gamma. The rain was real. Clouds hung heavy and oppressive over the mock ruins, dark and brooding like a storm about to break. Steel beams dripped with cold, glistening water, their surfaces slick and shiny under the gray, churning sky. The simulation tech flickered intermittently, casting ghostly shadows through the fog, static and unstable, like it was struggling to hold itself together against the storm. Aizawa's voice crackled over the comms, muffled and distant, like a whisper drowned in thunder. Midoriya and Shinso. Team 1, Bakugu and Kirishima. Team 2, Objective, secure the detonation point. Full contact allowed. Izuku adjusted his gauntlets, feeling the dampness seep through the fabric, cold and clammy against his skin. His hood stayed down, rain dripping off the brim, hair soaked and heavy. His gaze didn't shift across the field, didn't look directly at the figure crouched near the ledge, smoke trailing off one shoulder like a ghostly banner. But he felt him, like a nerve ending stretched tight and trembling, sharp, electric, ready to snap. 12:08 p.m. The clash had started with thunder, cracks splitting the sky, echoing like the world itself tearing apart. Bakugu launched from above, gauntlet blazing, lightning crackling along his arms, eyes fierce and burning. Kirishima flanked him, solid and unwavering, a wall of muscle and fire. Izuku stepped into the blast radius, barely flinching, feeling the force surge through him like a memory, an instinct, a reflex. His body moved before his mind could catch up, redirecting the impact, absorbing it like water. His partner peeled away, tactical, precise, like a shadow, slipping through the chaos. Katsuki didn't. He didn't pull back. They collided, body to body, clothes and flesh and fury. Eyes locked, neither backing down, neither pleading. "You never hold back now." Bakugu snarled, voice sharp and raw, breath ragged with adrenaline. Izuku parried a right hook, muscles tight, heart pounding. "Neither do you." They didn't call each other by name. They didn't need to. Their fists spoke louder than words, an unforgiving language of pain, regret, and rage. Their footwork was history, each moving a page in an old story. Every blow a wound reopened, raw and bleeding anew. And in the middle of it all, Katsuki's voice, low, cracked, close to breaking, barely a whisper. "Why do you keep letting me near you?" Izuku froze, suspended in that moment, caught between action and silence, the chaos around him fading into a deafening quiet inside. 1 second, just one, and Katsuki hit him. Hard. Izuku went down, body hitting the cold, wet ground, rain mixing with BLD and adrenaline, pain distant and hollowed out like a ghost of itself. 12:16 p.m. Smoke and sirens, he struck a steel beam shoulder first, the impact jarring, echoing through his bones like a hollow drum. Pain flared, distant, muffled, like a ghostly whisper, hollowed out by shock and exhaustion. The alarm blared, urgent, shrill, contact limit reached, flashing red and white, BLD pounding in his ears. Katsuki stood over him, chest heaving, rain cascading down his face, eyes wild and frantic. His hand was still outstretched, as if he wanted to catch the blow he'd already thrown, as if he'd broken something irreparable. Izuku looked up through rain and BLD, adrenaline and despair, and then, without warning, without grace, he kissed him. No warning. No warning at all. Just desperation. Their mouths collided, wet, raw, frantic like a panic attack caught mid-flight, every nerve-ending screaming. Katsuki's hands tangled in his cloak, trembling, unsure whether to push him away or pull him under, to surrender or to fight. Izuku gripped his collar desperately, as if holding onto the collapsing world, trying to stop everything from falling apart. It didn't last long, but it left them breathless, eyes wide, hands still clutching, like the fight hadn't ended, only shifted into a different form, a different battlefield. Group chat, Class 1 A+ Izuku, title, Chaos and Therapy, Kaminari. So, you kissed him. Jairu, I would like to formally thank pain and homoerotic violence, Uraraka. Are you okay, Ferret kind? I'm currently locked in a you kissed your mortal rival lecture with Aizawa. Ferret kind, this is almost as Midnight's lesson on intimacy last year, Shinso. Sorry, I think I just hallucinated, Shinso. What? Ida, is this what growth feels like, Ferret kind? It feels like bleeding and making out in the rain, Kaminari. Gay Uraraka, you were making eyes at him like you wanted to be punched or hugged, Ferret kind. He did both, Jairu, we know. Kirishima, unfortunately we saw 12:18 p.m. The worst possible timing footsteps, loud, angry, raw with frustration, resounded around the corner. Aizawa rounded the bend, shoulders tense, eyes narrowing with the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. He stopped abruptly, taking in the wrecked support beam, the shattered circuit panel, the two idiots still clutching each other like they hadn't noticed the simulation had shut off. His voice cracked, hoarse and furious. Are you Dash? He blinked, eyes wide in disbelief, watching the scene unfold. His coffee slipped from his hand, shattering across the floor with a deafening crash. The chaos hit him like a thunderclap, raining down on the scene, chaos and confusion swirling in his mind, the storm outside mirroring the storm inside. For the love of Dash, 11 p.m. Rooftop Katsuki showed up again. No yelling, no warning. He sat beside Izuku, bruised and angry and appealing. Neither of them looked at each other. Not at first. Then he whispered, "Do you regret it?" spoken in a low tone. Izuku swallowed hard. "No." "Good." The sky rolled above them, gray and quiet. Katsuki leaned back on his palms. Then, almost inaudibly, "You're the only person who ever stood still long enough for me to reach." Izuku turned toward him and didn't look away. Unfortunately, the otherwise peaceful moment was shattered by the roof door slamming open to reveal a very angry-looking Aizawa and a distressed Yamada saying something about retaking a lesson with Midnight, and, "Oh no, it began like most things at you. A lately quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that coils like a snake, waiting to strike, the silence before everything you know about the world gets torn open, shattered, and spilled across the floor." 3:21 a.m. UA. Alarm lockdown, the hallway lights flickered red, flickered like a warning no one dared ignore. Metal shutters crashed down over dorm exits with a deafening clang, like steel jaws snapping shut on safety. Sirens pulsed, deep, rhythmic beats, like a heartbeat caught in a nightmare, echoing through the bones of the building. By the time the students reached the common room, Aizawa was already there, eyes glowing faintly in the dark, scarf uncoiled like a threat barely kept in check, a predator in sleep mode. He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He simply said, "They're back. The League." The words hung heavy in the air, thick like fog, like the ground shifting beneath their feet, real and terrifying and unavoidable. 3:42 a.m. Intercept Point Bravo Izuku stood near the outer perimeter wall, wrapped in his full cloak, face unreadable, calm, collected, the eye of a storm. His heart beat steady, too steady, like a machine, a reminder that he was walking toward danger, but not afraid. Nizu had cleared him. Aizawa hadn't tried to stop him. He was walking toward where the League of Villains had been spotted, alone, the rain soaking through his cloak, water cold and relentless, like the world trying to drown him. He felt them, every shadow, every whisper of movement, like a nerve ending stretched too tight, trembling at the edge of pain. 4 a.m. Shigaraki the forest smelled like dust and ash, an oppressive, choking aroma that clung to the air, heavy and suffocating. Shigaraki stood at the center of the clearing, shoulders hunched, hands twitching with restless energy, like a beast pacing inside a cage. Twice loomed nearby, silent for once, eyes hollow and uncertain. Spinner stood to the side, shifting nervously, fidgeting, restless, the tension thick between them. Dabi was missing, burned out or watching. No one knew which, only the silence, heavy and oppressive, like a curse hanging in the air. And beside Shigaraki, Toga, smiling, sharp, eyes gleaming with hunger, staring at the edge of the clearing like she could smell BLD, like she was already tasting it. Izuku stepped out of the shadows. No fear, no hesitation, just silence. He didn't raise a weapon. He didn't need to. 4:01 a.m. The conversation begins. "You came alone," Shigaraki rasped, voice rough and low, like gravel scraped from a broken road. Izuku's eyes flickered, unreadable, calm as the rain that blurred the world around them. "You expected anything else. You're not like them," Shigaraki said softly, almost hopeful, like a ghost clinging to a flicker of light. "You get it. How broken this all is." Izuku said nothing, silent as a grave. "You're wasted on them," Shigaraki pressed, voice dark and dangerous. "They'll never let you fix what needs to break." "I don't need their permission," Izuku replied, voice steady, unwavering, like a mountain standing firm against the storm. "I don't need yours either." A heavy beat of silence. Shigaraki stepped closer, eyes flickering with something dangerous, desperation. "Maybe you could burn down with us." Izuku looked at him, really looked, and spoke softly, a whisper that cut through the tension like a blade. "You think you're free because you burn things. But all I see is a man still trying to set fire to the hands that hurt him. 4:03 a.m. Psychological warfare. Shigaraki twitched, fidgeted like a bomb about to explode. Izuku didn't move. You talk like a hero, Shigaraki snarled, voice thick with contempt. I talk like someone who has been afraid every day of his life and decided that fear isn't a good enough reason to become someone else's nightmare. Izuku shot back, voice cold and sharp, like a blade. Toga giggled softly, a sound like a whisper in the dark. I like him, she whispered, eyes gleaming with something dark and hungry. Izuku turned his gaze to her, steady and unyielding. You like people who bleed pretty. You think love is about possession, about turning someone into something small enough to keep, he said, voice calm but layered with meaning. She blinked, tilting her head, trying to hide the flicker of uncertainty behind her smile. That's not how I mean it. You don't know what you mean yet, Izuku said quietly, almost gently. He pointed behind him, toward the faint line of dorm lights flickering in the distance. But there's someone in that building who is kind enough to teach you. 4:06 a.m. Uraraka had followed him, of course. How could she not? When she stepped into the clearing, Toga turned toward her like gravity itself had shifted, pulling her forward into a storm she couldn't escape. Pretty, Toga said, grinning wide, dangerous, sharp like a knife. And soft. Uraraka did not smile. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, like a shield, a wall. You're not going to tell me to leave. Izuku shook his head once, slow and deliberate. I think you've got something to say. Uraraka stepped forward, voice firm and clear, eyes burning with conviction. I'm not scared of you. Toga's smile widened, teeth baring like a predator. Not yet, she replied, mouth full of teeth. I don't think you want me to be. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Toga's face, curiosity, hesitation, the tiniest crack in her mask. Izuku saw it, felt the shift in the storm, and he smiled. 4:10 a.m. Collapse. Shigaraki's breath came hard and ragged now, like the space around him was pressing in, suffocating. You think you're smarter than me, he hissed, voice trembling with fury and frustration. You think you can talk me out of this? I think you're a scared child still screaming at the house that burned down without you, Izuku said coldly, voice like steel, unyielding. Silence stretched between them, thick and deadly. Izuku stepped forward, voice icy and sharp. You want me on your side? Then build something worth standing beside. Not just pain with a different name. Shigaraki's hands curled into fists, trembled with rage and despair, but he did not attack. And that was all the proof Izuku needed. 4:12 a.m. The Exit Nizu's team arrived in the quiet. Just moments later, silent, precise, a storm of their own. Shigaraki did not stay. Neither did Toga. But when she glanced back, it wasn't at Izuku, no. Her eyes flicked to Uraraka, sharp and curious. Her smile was different now. No longer violent, no longer flirtatious. Just a quiet, predatory curiosity, an unspoken question lurking beneath her lips. Uraraka blinked, caught off guard, then returned to look, small, confused, innocent but somehow open, vulnerable. And Toga's smile softened, almost tender, almost longing. Not violent, not flirtatious, just curious. 5 a.m. Debrief room. Izuku sat in the darkness, still suited, hands wrapped in gauze he didn't remember wrapping. Mike sat beside him, quiet and tense. Aizawa stood by the door, watching, silent. Nizu was already writing the fallout report, his paws moving swiftly across the paper, the quiet hum of his mind filling the room. You did not fight, Aizawa said softly. Izuku's voice was calm, almost distant. I did not have to. Mike let out a low whistle, eyes heavy with exhaustion and awe. Kid, you did not de-escalate. You dismantled their will to escalate. Izuku leaned back, eyes heavy, mind spinning. I told the truth. Group chat, Class 1A plus Izuku, title, Chaos and Therapy. Uraraka, I think she wants to see me again, Drew. OMG Kaminari. Are we going to date the enemies now? Problem_child. Enemies is a social construct, Ida. And oh, Uraraka. She did not try to hurt me, problem_child. She looked at you like she didn't know whether to run or reach Jeru. That's gay problem underscore child. You're not wrong. 11 p.m. Dorm rooftop. Izuku stood at the edge, wind tugging at his sleeves. Katsuki joined him, boots scuffing the stone. You did not kill them, Katsuki said. I did not have to. You scare me sometimes, Katsuki admitted. I scare me sometimes. They stood in silence. Then, if I fall, Izuku asked, would you catch me? Katsuki did not answer with words. He just stepped closer and stayed. The alley was wet with summer rain and the flickering, dying glow of old neon signs. Puddles reflected fragmented shards of light, rippling with each drop that fell from the sky, cold, sharp, and relentless. The air smelled of damp concrete, burnt ozone, and distant echoes of a city that never truly slept. Uraraka moved carefully, boots splashing softly against the slick pavement, every step cautious but deliberate. Her breath fogged in the cool air as she rounded the corner of a shuttered bodega. The metal shutters rusted and faded, the silence thick and heavy, like a hell breath. And there, sitting on the edge of a garbage bin like a cat too pretty to be astray, was Himiko Toga. Her hair was damp, curls clinging to her face, eyes glowing with an unnatural gold in the dark, dangerous, unpredictable, alive. You came, Toga said softly, voice like silk wrapped around a knife, eyes gleaming with a wild light that danced in the shadows. Uraraka hesitated, her heart pounding, an odd mixture of fear, curiosity, and something softer, deeper. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel as she stepped closer. You're wearing my color, Uraraka replied, voice trembling slightly but steady. Toga looked down, fingers tracing the hem of her pink hoodie, the fabric scuffed and stained with dirt and rain. A splash of red, almost like BLD, spread under her collar, a splash of chaos that marked her presence. Do you like it? Uraraka paused, the words lingering between them, fragile and uncertain. I haven't decided. They did not fight. Not at first. They just walked. Through empty side streets, past flickering streetlights that cast long, twisted shadows, trading silence like cards, each one holding secrets, wounds, unspoken truths. Do you ever wish you'd picked a different path? Uraraka asked eventually, voice tentative, as if afraid to disturb the fragile quiet. Toga shrugged, a movement almost too casual to be honest. No, but sometimes I wish the path had picked someone else. Uraraka stopped walking, a cold wind sweeping past her, the silence stretching painfully between them. Toga did not. I think you're lonelier than you pretend, Uraraka said softly, voice trembling with a mixture of empathy and vulnerability. Toga's shoulders tensed, a flicker of something unreadable passing through her eyes. And I think you're kinder than you want to be, she replied, voice low, dangerous, honest. A pause. Then, softly, almost a whisper, do you want me to stop? Uraraka's heart clenched, the words caught in her throat, raw and trembling. No, she said softly, voice trembling with emotion. But maybe don't make me fall in love with you during a stakeout. Toga grinned, teeth sharp and bright in the darkness, dangerous, teasing alive. Too late. The night stretched around them, thick with unspoken truths, fragile hopes, and the chaos of two souls dangerously close, caught in a silent storm neither knew how to weather. The teacher's dorm was unusually quiet, a silence that stretched like a fragile thread, delicate and almost painful in its emptiness. Aizawa stood in the kitchen, a silhouette against the dull glow of the small overhead light, making instant ramen with the weary precision of a man who'd long since forgotten what dinner was supposed to feel like, an act performed out of habit, not hunger. Mike leaned in the doorway, watching him, the space between them thick and heavy with unspoken words. Long day, Mike asked softly, voice low, almost a whisper. Aizawa muttered, without turning, voice rough and tired. They're always long. Mike stepped closer, the air between them charged with something unspoken, years of longing, regret, and a quiet hope that refused to die. No jokes, no flash, just presence. He closed the distance, standing close enough that Aizawa could feel the warmth of him, an unspoken question hanging in the space. "You've been sleeping on the couch again?" Mike said quietly, voice trembling with gentle accusation. Aizawa glanced at him, his face a mask of tired indifference. "I like the couch." "You hate the couch," Mike whispered, voice almost trembling now, filled with something fragile and desperate. Aizawa didn't answer. So Mike did it for him. "You're scared that if you admit you care about someone, they'll get added to the list of people you couldn't save," Mike said softly, eyes dark and searching. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, as if the words had finally broken a dam that had held for a decade. Then, almost as an afterthought, Mick's voice softened further, trembling with honesty and tenderness. "I care about you too, Sho." And that single, simple phrase, heavy with decades of longing, broke something in the quiet stillness. Aizawa's hand stilled. He did not look up, but he stepped forward, a slow, deliberate movement, like a promise, like a confession, like a prayer long whispered in the dark. Mike wrapped his arms around him, tight, warm, holding on as if the silence between them might shatter otherwise. Neither of them spoke, but something in the silence changed, something finally named after 10 years of wishing, waiting, pinning. And in that quiet, something finally, quietly was understood. The League was in motion. News traveled through underground networks like whispers in a dark, twisting maze, faint, urgent, almost indecipherable. Cameras flickered and sputtered, their feeds glitching out like static on an old radio, leaving behind fleeting glimpses of shadowed alleyways, secret hideouts, and the faint hum of electronics on the verge of failure. The city's pro-hero task forces were stretched thin, overburdened, fractured, chasing shadows while the darkness grew bolder beneath their feet. The faint scent of burnt RBB and ozone filled the air, a reminder that chaos was always just beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. In a forgotten, abandoned train tunneled deep beneath the city, the silence was thick, almost alive, pressing against their skin like a warning. Dust motes floated lazily in the stale air, swirling in the faint glow of flickering, dying lights. The distant drip of water echoed like a heartbeat, slow and rhythmic, marking every moment that passed in this hidden war zone. And there, in the shadows, Shigaraki and Izuku faced each other again. Shigaraki's voice was low, almost a whisper, but carried a weight that made the air around them seem to tighten. "I'm not here to fight." Izuku did not sit. He stood stiff and alert, the muscles in his body taut with tension, eyes sharp and searching. The faint scent of rain clung to his skin, mixed with the metallic tang of BLD and dirt, a reminder of the battles they'd already fought, of the stakes hanging in the balance. "I've heard that one before," Izuku replied, voice cold and measured. "Then people end up dead." Shigaraki stepped closer, each movement deliberate, the gravelly sound of his footsteps echoing in the hollow tunnel. "I'm giving you a chance." A pause, thick with unspoken history, regret, and the ghost of promises broken. "I've had chances," Izuku said, voice steady but edged with a quiet fury that threatened to spill over. "No," Shigaraki said softly, stepping into the faint light, eyes gleaming like a predator's. "You've had responsibilities. Guilt. Leashes disguised as purpose. But you could burn it all. You could start over." The words hung in the air, heavy and oppressive, like the dark concrete walls closing in around them, trapping them in a moment that felt suspended in time. Izuku tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied him, measuring, weighing, feeling the weight of every word. Then he smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was slow, cold, and sharp, like a blade slipping between ribs. "You're still asking me to join something smaller than I am." Shigaraki flinched, like the words struck him deep, a blow to the core, silent but devastating. Izuku stepped past him, the faint scrape of his shoes against the gritty floor echoing in the vast emptiness. "No crown is worth less than the weight it puts on everyone else," Izuku said softly, voice like a whisper of steel. And as he moved deeper into the shadows, the tension in the tunnel grew thick, an invisible storm gathering strength, threatening to explode at any moment. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until only the distant drip of water and the faint hum of failing electronics dared to break it. The moment lingered, silent, deadly, inevitable, until the darkness finally swallowed everything whole, leaving only the echo of their unspoken truths behind. It was 2 a.m., a time when the city's noise had faded into a dull hum, dissolved into shadows and secrets. The knock was soft, almost tentative, like a whisper carried on the wind. Uraraka was already half awake, her heart pounding faintly in her chest as she opened her dorm window, the cool night air rushing in, damp and heavy with rain. Outside, drenched and trembling, was Toga. She crouched on the sill, soaked in rain and adrenaline, the storm outside mirroring the chaos within her. "I'm not here to kill anyone," Toga said, voice quick and trembling, almost desperate. "I just did not have anywhere else to go." Uraraka hesitated, then slowly nodded, voice gentle but firm. "Let her in." Toga collapsed into the corner of the bed, limbs trembling as she hugged her knees tightly, rainwater dripping from her hair, pooling on the floor like spilled secrets. Her shoulders shivered, not from cold, but from something darker, deeper. "I think I'm too far gone," she whispered, voice hoarse and trembling, almost swallowed by the night. Uraraka sat beside her, the silence between them thick and heavy, like a storm waiting to break. "You're still here," Uraraka said softly, voice trembling with quiet hope. "So you're not gone yet." Toga blinked, eyes shimmering with exhaustion and something fragile, fear, longing, the weight of years spent running from herself. Then she laughed, choked, wet and tired, an honest, ragged sound that cracked the fragile night open. And when she leaned her head against Uraraka's shoulder, the warmth of her, a trembling, broken thing, did not push away. Neither of them moved, the moment stretching, suspended in the rain and darkness, fragile as glass, yet somehow fierce with unspoken understanding. In that quiet, rain-soaked night, beneath the storm clouds and the weight of unspoken truths, they simply existed, two souls trembling in the darkness, holding on to the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, they weren't entirely lost. Group chat, Class 1 A+ Izuku, title, Chaos and Therapy, Kaminari. So are Uraraka and Toga dating or Jiru? Let them be gay and stabby in Peace-Ida. I am reporting this to Aizawa Uraraka. He already knows problem underscore child. I offered to install a secure line between their rooms. Jiru. Deku problem underscore child. What? They're cute. 308. Silence. At first, it was just a flicker, a barely perceptible disturbance in the dark, almost too subtle to notice. A single hallway light in the east wing sputtered once, a static crackle in the silence, then buzzed low, dimming into nothingness. The faint hum of electronics faltered, replaced by an oppressive stillness that pressed against the walls like a living thing. Then another, then another. The flickering grew, a slow, spreading shadow. The entire grid, UA's internal alert network, a complex web woven by Power Loader and upgraded meticulously by Nizu himself, began to unravel. Every camera feed from the outer perimeter went dead, swallowed by darkness. No interference, no tampering, just pure, absolute absence. Like the eyes of the campus had blinked out, leaving only silence and shadows. In the surveillance hub, Nizu's paw hovered over the override SWCH, trembling slightly in instinctive hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty. His eyes squeezed shut for exactly 2 seconds, a silent prayer in the chaos. Then he pressed the button. The campus lights flashed red, an emergency flare igniting the night sky. The alarms blared, a deafening, shrill cry of warning that echoed through the halls and tunnels. Metal shutters began to seal, grinding shut with a growl of machinery and steel, the sound brutal and relentless. The air thickened with the scent of ozone and burnt circuitry, an acrid reminder that the safety they relied on was crumbling. And somewhere deep in the dorms, in the shadows thick with moisture and fear, Aizawa should his eyes snapped open, dark, alert, ready. 310, the faculty hall? I'm awake, Aizawa said, voice rough but steady, as Hisashi Yamada stumbled into the corridor behind him. His hair was sleep-creased, shirt half unbuttoned, boots scraping the floor. The faint scent of sweat and exhaustion clung to him, a testament to the chaos outside. You always are, Mike grunted, already pulling his jacket over his shoulders, the fabric rustling with a sound that seemed too loud in the tense silence. His eyes flicked toward the northern monitors, the screens flickering with static and darkness. What's the breach? Mike asked, voice low, edged with urgency. Aizawa's gaze remained fixed on the monitors, his eyes narrowing as he took in the empty feeds, the dead zones. All external sensors are dead. Surveillance black. It's not a drill. His voice was calm, but layered with something darker, an unspoken warning. That explains the sirens, Mike muttered, adjusting his earpiece, the static crackling like distant thunder. Nizu's channel is offline. Aizawa's jaw clenched, a flicker of tension passing through him. It's not just a breach, he said softly, voice like a blade sliding into the darkness. It's coordinated. He did not say it aloud, but both men knew. The only group capable of this level of precision, of slicing through their defenses without a trace or a face, was back. The League was back, and they had come to burn everything down. 315, the dorm's Class 1, it had been trained for emergencies. In theory, Kaminari looked like he'd fallen straight out of bed, one sock missing, eyes wide and wild with sleep and adrenaline. His hair was a mess, stray strands sticking to his damp face. Jairu had earbuds looped around her wrist like a makeshift weapon, her breath shallow, muscles tense. Ito was already issuing orders in clipped, formal tones, trying to mask the tremor in his hands, the tremor that betrayed the fear gnawing at him from within. And Izuku. Izuku was calm. Not numb. Not cold. Just ready. His cloak hung loose over a reinforced undersuit, the fabric dark and heavy with rain and determination. His gloves were already on, the utility belt double-checked, the faint scent of ozone clinging to him like a second skin. He stood by the window, staring out into the abyss of darkness, the night sky a black canvas punctuated by distant flashes of lightning, an omen of what was coming. His expression was unreadable, the stillness of someone who had already seen what was about to unfold. Behind him, Uraraka's voice trembled slightly, fragile and uncertain. Do you think they're really here? He didn't answer. He already knew, because the storm inside him, the one that had been building for years, was finally about to break. 323, the first fire it began in the north, silent at first, then violent. 1 second, the reinforced wall stood tall, layered in metal plates, support beams, and quirk-dampening alloys, impenetrable. The next, it was engulfed in flame, blue-white heat licking through steel like paper, melting barriers as if they were nothing but wax. The roar of fire and destruction filled the air, a relentless, deafening symphony of chaos. Dabi stepped through the smoke, his silhouette framed by licking flames and embers that shimmered like dying stars. His eyes were pleading, begging Izuku silently, a silent scream for him to run, to escape the inferno. He wasn't alone. Twice clones poured in behind him, exact copies, identical bodies formed out of nothing, armed with jury-rigged gear and reckless energy, shadows of destruction intent on chaos. They did not attack the dorms directly. Not yet. They moved to draw the line, to scatter the defenders, to pull the students into panic, to separate and isolate them in the darkness, to break them. And from the east, Izuku ran, his cloak whipping behind him like smoke, every step mapped, every detour pre-calculated, driven by a purpose deeper than fear. He was heading for the place they couldn't reach fast enough, the place where Shigaraki waited, an unspoken promise, a storm waiting to break. 326. Izuku he moved like a shadow across rooftops, silent and precise. The rain mixed with the sweat on his skin, cold and unforgiving. Every step was a calculation, every move a question. What could go wrong? What might go wrong? What must be done? His mind wasn't chasing signals or following orders. It was heading somewhere unseen, unseen by the chaos, unseen by the world. He was going to the heart of the storm, the place only he knew how to reach, where Shigaraki waited, where everything might finally explode. 331. The perimeter when he found him, the clearing was eerily quiet, strangely, disturbingly so, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The trees bore the scars of earlier chaos, light burns, shallow and smoky, lingering like ghosts of destruction. Shards of shattered stone littered the grass, jagged teeth that glinted maliciously in the flickering light. And there, standing beneath a flickering floodlight, was Tamura Shigaraki. Alone, no cloak, no hand mask, just scars, craters, and lines carved into flesh and breath, a slow, measured rhythm, almost feral in its calm. "You always come first," Shigaraki said, voice hollow and low, like a blade scraping against stone. His eyes gleamed with a dangerous calm, one that betrayed the chaos beneath. "I like that about you." Izuku did not approach, did not posture, just waited, a silent sentinel on the edge of the darkness. "You're not here to kill anyone," he said quietly, voice steady as steel. Shigaraki's smile cracked, unhinged, unsteady, dangerous. "Not yet," he whispered, the words a promise and a threat woven together, hanging in the cold night air. 335. Dialogue of Ghosts. "I thought maybe you'd understand by now," Shigaraki began, pacing slowly, the gravel crunching beneath his feet like a heartbeat, slow, heavy, deliberate. "The way they use you, build you up, worship you, the golden boy. But you're just a tool." Izuku's eyes remained steady, unblinking, every nerve alive, waiting, watching, feeling the weight of each word. "And you're not," Izuku countered, voice calm but edged with a quiet fury. Shigaraki flinched, a flicker of something, uncertainty, pain, passing through his gaze. "You think this is freedom," Izuku continued, voice a low rumble. "But you've just replaced one leash with another. You don't know anything about me. I know what it looks like to live in someone else's shadow. I know what it's like to bleed for a system that only loves you when you're useful." A pause. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the weight of unspoken truths. "But I also know what it means to choose. And you stopped choosing a long time ago." 337. Shigaraki's hand, he raised his hand, not to attack, but as if asking a question, what else is there? The ash on his palm glowed faintly, a dying ember in the darkness. Izuku didn't move, didn't strike. He simply said, voice like a whisper of thunder, "You're trying to set fire to a world that already burned. But that's not rebellion. That's just grief." The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until the night itself seemed to hold its breath. And then it was over. 347. Physics Wing, North Corridor. The corridor looked like something out of a collapsed cathedral, ruined, sacred, broken. Smoke curled sluggishly through fractured support beams, drifting in slow, ghostly tendrils that shivered in the stale air. The tiles beneath their feet were flooded ankle-deep with water, pouring from the emergency sprinkler system, cold and clammy, mixing with streaks of crimson that wound through cracks in the floor like ivy twining through ruins, silent and relentless. A chunk of plaster dropped from the ceiling with a muffled crash, dust and debris swirling in the air like whispers of what once was. And then, bursting through the chaos, Tenya Ida appeared, eyes wide, visor fogged with sweat and panic, breath fogging the glass as he skidded across the slick floor. "Midoriya," he shouted, voice cracking like a WHB, desperation sharp in every word. "There's a breach in the dash." He stopped abruptly. There, beneath a fractured support beam, lay Shoyuta, barely conscious, half his body pinned beneath the remnants of what had once been a reinforced ceiling joint. BLD seeped into the water, mingling with the fractured debris, a vivid, sickening reminder of how fragile everything was. Ida didn't hesitate. He threw himself forward, sliding through the water with a wet, splashing sound, boots catching on sharp-edged pipes, sparks dancing overhead, hot, jagged flashes that seemed to crack the very air around him. Shoyuda groaned softly, a noise of pain and shock, trembling beneath the weight. "I'll get you out," Ida said urgently, voice trembling but fierce, hands trembling with the effort to save. "Just hold on." He braced his foot against the floor, muscles straining, and pulled with all his might. The sound of tearing metal, the creak of broken support, the shuddering collapse of the ceiling joint. The beam refused to budge. A shadow suddenly fell over him, darkening the chaotic scene, a presence that chilled the air even further. And then Izuku was there, panting, eyes burning with adrenaline and something darker, pain, guilt, a fierce determination that refused to break. He didn't speak. He just lifted. Ida grunted, Shoyuda gasped, flesh and debris and BLD smeared across their arms, slick and sticky against the cold, wet floor. "Go," Izuku commanded softly, voice thick and urgent. "Get him to medical. Now." Ida didn't argue. He nodded, cradled the boy carefully against his chest, and ran, feet pounding on waterlogged tiles, the weight of the moment pressing down like stone. 350. Observation deck midnight leaned against a pillar, breath shallow, her left temple streaked with BLD that ran down her face, sticky and warm. Two of Twice clones lay at her feet, broken, flickering in and out of existence, like dying stars losing their glow. A third had its face smashed into the wall behind her, unconscious or worse. She held her broken right wrist against her ribs, trembling, pain radiating through her bones like lightning. She kicked the fourth clone with enough force to dislocate its jaw, a quiet snarl of frustration breaking through her lips. "Unoriginal," she muttered, voice hoarse, eyes burning with fury and exhaustion. The clone stumbled, wobbling like a puppet with broken strings. She drove her heel into its knee, the joint giving way with a sickening crack. It collapsed hard onto the floor, limbs twitching. She didn't wait for it to rise again. When Mike reached her, she was already limping toward the exit, her movements sluggish but determined, one eye swollen shut, breath ragged. He caught her elbow, support tentative, but she waved him off with her good hand, the other trembling. "I'm fine. You're bleeding," Mike said quietly, concern etched into every word. "Better than the alternative," she replied, voice rough but steady, eyes flickering with something fierce, raging, resilient. Mike did not smile. He just kept pace beside her, their shadows stretching long and dark in the pale-to-red light of the corridor, silent witnesses to their silent war. 356. The library. The fire had not reached the library yet, but something else had. The air inside felt heavy, still, like the room had just finished holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Ochako Uraraka stepped through the east entrance, her boots quiet against the linoleum, senses alert, every nerve alive. Books had fallen from the shelves, pages fluttering like wounded birds, torn and scattered across the floor, whispering stories of destruction. And there, half hidden behind the main desk, crouched in the shadows, arms wrapped around her knees, was Himiko Toga. Her knife lay discarded on the floor, an afterthought, forgotten in the chaos of her tears. Her face was wet, trembling with tears, silent and raw, a living wound. Uraraka did not reach for her weapon. She didn't raise her hands or threaten. She simply paused, watching the fragile, broken figure, heart pounding in her chest. Toga looked up, eyes wild, shimmering with pain and something darker. "I did not stab anyone," she whispered, voice trembling like a fragile thread. "Not tonight." Uraraka blinked, caught between instinct and empathy. "Then why are you crying?" Toga's voice was a whisper, lost, hollow, unmoored. "I don't know anymore." The words spilled out like BLD from an open wound, raw, unfiltered, impossible to contain. Uraraka stepped closer, slow and careful, every movement measured. "Then stay here," she said softly, voice trembling with compassion. "You're going to be arrested. Maybe worse." "I know," Toga replied, voice trembling but resigned, eyes flickering with something fragile. Hope or despair? It was hard to tell. "You could run," Uraraka whispered, voice barely audible. "I'm tired of running," Toga answered softly, eyes fixed on her, vulnerable, exposed, unguarded. Their gazes locked, unspoken truths hanging in the air, powerful, fragile. Uraraka exhaled slowly, the weight of years in that breath. "I won't stop you," she said quietly. "But if you want to leave, you have to walk past me." Toga stood, hesitation flickering across her face. Their faces were less than a foot apart now, breath mingling, the scent of smoke in Uraraka's hair, the faint tremor in Toga's trembling hands. "I think you're the only person who ever saw me," Toga whispered, voice cracked and raw. "Not as a monster, not as a joke, just as something I did not have to be afraid of." Uraraka's voice was gentle but firm. "Then don't be." She turned, and Toga followed, out of the shadows, into the uncertain night, their footsteps silent, but their hearts pounding with unspoken promises. For 12, aftermath, the alarms continued their relentless scream, echoing through the wreckage, but no one listened anymore. The remnants of the League had scattered, broken, battered, vanishing into the darkness. Dobby slipped through the tree-line, flames licking at his heels, burning without a target, lost in the night. Compress was found unconscious near the southern wing, his mask cracked, jaw dislocated, BLD pooling beneath him like a dark, living puddle. Twice clones dissolved one by one, waterlogged uniforms, broken limbs, and shattered hope, their forms dissolving into nothingness. Spinner had retreated with Shigaraki, wounded, limping but still standing, an unspoken defiance in every step. And Toga, she sat quietly on the dorm steps, wrapped in a blanket, a warm drink clasped in trembling hands, a fragile shell of herself. She did not speak. She did not run. But she stayed, anchored in the silence, holding on to something unspoken, something fragile and precious amid the chaos. For 29, the infirmary Aizawa sat on the edge of cot, a long, thin cut running from wrist to elbow along his forearm. He refused stitches, eyes hard and unyielding, waiting until every student was accounted for, alive or lost. Mike stood beside him, arms crossed, tense, back pressed against the wall, an anchor in the storm. "You should lie down," Mike said softly, voice heavy with concern. "So should you," Aizawa replied quietly, eyes fixed on the sterile ceiling. Mike snorted, a bitter smile curling on his lips. "We're disasters." "Speak for yourself," Aizawa shot back, voice low, but the tension crackling like static. A pause, thick and heavy, before Aizawa's voice softened, almost a whisper. "She could have died." Mick's eyes flickered, his jaw tightening. "I know. I'm not ready to lose any of them," Aizawa said finally, voice trembling with unspoken fear. Mike reached out, very slowly, taking his hand, warm, calloused, steady. Aizawa did not flinch, didn't look at him, but his fingers curled around Mick's, holding on, silent, desperate, unspoken. It was the closest he could get to saying, "I love you." And for Hisashi, in that moment, it was enough. The air up top was cold, crisp and clear, untouched by chaos. Izuku stood near the edge, gloves gone, cloak in tatters, the fabric torn and fluttering like wounded wings in the wind. The city stretched out beneath him, vast, scarred, healing in its own slow, relentless way. Behind him, the sound of boots clicked against the stone, Katsuki's footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching without a word. "Kakin." Katsuki didn't answer. He kept walking until he was close enough to touch, but he didn't. They stood in silence, the wind whispering past, tangling their hair, carrying unspoken questions and truths. "Why'd you do it?" Katsuki asked finally, voice rough and low. eyes searching. All of this. Izuku stared ahead, eyes distant but focused. Because someone had to. Because if we waited for permission, we'd be dead. Katsuki turned to look at him, silent, stubborn. You kissed me, Katsuki said suddenly, voice raw with something unspoken. I did, Izuku replied calmly, voice even, unwavering. Gonna do it again. Izuku blinked, then slowly leaned in, the gravity of the moment shifting, soft, deliberate, honest. This kiss was different. Not desperate, not a scream, just the truth, shared in silence, in the quiet between thunderclaps. When they parted, Katsuki's voice was a whisper, almost afraid to speak it aloud. It's still us. And Izuku smiled, a slow, genuine smile, warm and uncertain and finally, truly free. Yeah, it is. 701. Recovery Girl's office. The war was over. Or at least, this one was. The hall stretched in haunting silence, dark, still, heavy with the weight of everything that had transpired. The windows still smoked, haze curling like ghostly breath in the cold air, casting flickering shadows that danced on cracked walls. The silence that settled over you, was no longer the silence of dread, no longer the deafening roar of chaos, but the quiet of aftermath, of what happens when a storm finally passes, leaving only broken pieces and fragile hope. Izuku sat on an examination bed, the sterile scent of disinfectant and sterilized linens filling his senses. His left shoulder was wrapped in bandages, the fabric stiff and cool against his skin. His right ankle was elevated on a pillow, the ache dull but persistent, another reminder of the chaos endured. 6 stitches crossed his jaw, flying debris carving through flesh and bone, and a bruise painted half his side like a storm cloud, dark and swollen, pulsing with every beat of his heart. Across from him, Katsuki stood, arms crossed, eyes heavy-lidded, a fortress of silence and restraint. Neither had spoken since they entered, the weight of unspoken truths pressing between them like a wall of shadows. Finally, Recovery Girl cleared her throat, the sharp sound slicing through the quiet, sharp enough to be a gunshot in the stillness. Well, she said softly, almost teasing, eyes twinkling with mischief. Are you dating? Katsuki choked, eyes widening in shock, face flushing with color. Izuku blinked, stunned into complete uselessness, the question hitting him like a punch to the gut. I dash, Katsuki stammered, voice caught somewhere between denial and disbelief. Recovery Girl casually dabbed antiseptic onto Izuku's trembling hand, her tone light but knowing. You're not subtle, she said, eyes crinkling with amusement. Everyone saw the rooftop, and the battlefield, and the way you looked at each other like you'd die if the other blinked too long. We're not dash, Katsuki started to protest, voice strained and defensive. She raised an eyebrow, an unspoken challenge. Katsuki deflated, shoulders slumping as if the air had been let out of him. Izuku coughed softly, voice trembling with honesty. It's complicated, he admitted, quiet but raw, the words hanging like fragile glass in the tense silence. She finished bandaging his wrist with delicate care, her touch gentle but firm, a quiet reminder of the fragile thread holding everything together. You're both idiots, she said kindly, voice warm with understanding. But you're alive. So maybe figure out what that means before the next time someone throws a grenade through your window. 7:45. Common room. The dorm was still half dark, shadows flickering in the faint glow of the dying lights, like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for the dawn. The coffee pot dripped slowly, each drop a fragile, rhythmic heartbeat, like it might collapse under the weight of its own responsibility. Izuku sat at the corner of the table, hood pulled up over his head, the fabric hiding the exhaustion in his eyes, the tremor in his shoulders. His senses felt dulled, yet hyper-aware, every ache, every whisper of pain, every distant sound amplified in the quiet aftermath. Katsuki poured 2 cups of coffee, dark, bitter, steaming, and set one down next to Izuku, then didn't sit. "So," Katsuki finally said, voice rough but tentative, eyes flickering with unspoken questions. Izuku looked up. "So, are we going to talk about it?" "I thought we were." Katsuki looked like he wanted to throw something, clench his fists, scream, break something fragile in the silent night. "You kissed me. Then you fought beside me. Then you kissed me again," Katsuki said, voice low and trembling with a weight of hesitation. "Correct," Izuku replied simply, voice even but laced with something unreadable, bitterness, hope, exhaustion. "And you think that's enough?" Izuku stared at his cup, the dark liquid swirling in silence, feeling the weight of the question pressing down. Then softly, almost a whisper, he asked, "Do you want it to be?" Katsuki sat, slowly, as if the answer scared him, as if the truth might shatter him into pieces. And finally, he said, voice trembling but resolute, Yeah, I do." Izuku didn't smile, but inside, something settled, like a wound stitching shut, a fragile, trembling hope finally weaving itself into the fabric of their fractured world. And in that quiet, in that fragile moment of stillness, truth finally found a voice, a silent promise that, no matter what chaos lay ahead, they would face it together. 1400 hours. Faculty dorm, hallway. The sun had finally risen, piercing through the high windows with sharp, unforgiving light. It cast jagged streaks of gold across the broken floor tiles, illuminating the scars of chaos, cracks, shattered glass, and dust motes swirling lazily in the air, caught in the faint beam like tiny, dying stars. Aizawa leaned against his office door, the weight of exhaustion heavy in his shoulders. He sipped black coffee from a chipped mug, bitter, hot, grounding him in the moment. His scarf was looped twice around his shoulders, tight, familiar, an old habit, a simple comfort in the aftermath of chaos. Hizashi stood across from him, coat undone, hair pulled back into a loose tie, an unspoken vulnerability in his stance, the faint tremor of fatigue beneath his calm exterior. They did not speak at first. No words were needed here, only the heavy silence after a storm, the low hum of post-crisis fatigue that settled like a shroud around them. Then Mike broke the quiet, a soft, teasing remark that cut through the stillness, gentle yet pointed. "You're staring again," he said quietly, voice low but steady, eyes flickering with affection and frustration all at once. Aizawa took another slow sip of his coffee, eyes dark and tired, the mug warm against his palm. "You're standing in my hallway," he replied, voice calm, even. "That's not a denial," Mike said softly, stepping closer, 2 feet, then 1, closing the distance between them with hesitant, deliberate steps, the air thickening with unspoken emotion. His voice was gentle now, almost fragile. "You don't have to say it." Aizawa looked up, eyes meeting mixed, dark, tired, unflinching, honest to the core. "I want to," he whispered, voice barely more than breath, trembling with vulnerability. Silence stretched, thick and heavy, as Mike blinked, surprised, almost holding his breath. "I'm tired," Aizawa admitted softly, words spilling out like a confession he'd kept buried for too long. "Of pretending I don't feel things. Of thinking that if I say the wrong word, I'll lose what I already have." He looked up then, eyes deep and weary but filled with a quiet, unwavering truth. "I love you, Hizashi." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It simply was. An unadorned, raw truth laid bare in the quiet dawn. Mike reached out, gently taking the mug from Aizawa's hand, setting it down carefully on the desk behind them, an act almost reverent, tender in its simplicity. Then he pulled Aizawa in, their foreheads almost touching, and kissed him, not hard, not desperate, but slow and quiet, like relief, like coming home after a long, stormy night. It was a kind of kiss that didn't need words, only the soft, steady beat of 2 hearts finally finding their way back to each other in the fragile dawn of a new day. 1922, Rooftop Toga stood at the railing, arms folded loosely across her chest, her hair swept back by the wind, soft gusts tugging at the strands like whispers of uncertainty. She wore borrowed sweats, comfort layered over vulnerability, and a too-big hoodie that read you. Support course on the front, the letters stretched and faded as if barely holding onto meaning. Beside her, Uraraka leaned forward, elbows resting on the railing, her chin cupped in her hands. She watched the sun sink slowly beyond the horizon, the sky bleeding into shades of amber and violet, the world holding its breath in the quiet after the storm. Neither spoke for a long moment. Only the gentle whisper of wind, the distant cry of a bird, the fading warmth of the day, settling into something softer, more fragile. Then, Toga's voice broke the silence, soft, almost hesitant. I thought I was broken. Uraraka turned her head slightly, eyes distant but attentive. I still think I'm scared, she replied, voice quiet but steady, a confession wrapped in humility. They looked at each other, eyes searching, holding unspoken truths in the quiet space between them. Uraraka shrugged a small, tentative gesture, like an acknowledgement of pain, of uncertainty, of hope. I guess that's a start. Toga's lips curled into a crooked smile, small, imperfect, honest. I don't know what we are, she admitted, voice trembling with honesty. Do we need to? Uraraka answered softly, her gaze gently resting on the horizon. Toga's smile grew, softening, a fragile bloom in the dusk. No, not yet. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she took Uraraka's, warm, tentative, real. Uraraka let her hold it, fingers intertwining like a promise, unstated but felt deeply. They stayed that way, silent, watching as the light faded, shadows lengthening, the world quietly shifting around them, two hearts quietly healing in the fading glow of the sunset, holding on to each other in the fragile, uncertain moment before darkness. 2200 hours. Classroom 1A. The desks have been pushed aside or shoved together, scattered in disarray, evidence of hurried movement, of chaos left behind. Someone had left a mug of cocoa on Midoriya's desk, steam rising faintly in the cool air, the scent sweet and comforting amidst the wreckage. He sat on the floor, back leaning against the chalkboard, the cool surface rough against his skin. His notebook lay open across his lap, untouched, no ink, no words, only the weight of the quiet, the unspoken thoughts lingering in the space between. He wasn't writing. He was just holding it. The door swung open without a knock, footsteps steady and familiar. Katsuki entered, the air around him tense, heavy with unspoken things. He moved to sit beside Izuku, the silence thick as he took a heavy exhale, shoulders relaxing just a little. You okay? Katsuki's voice was low, rough, tentative, an anchor in the quiet storm. Izuku tilted his head, gaze flickering to the moonlight spilling through the window, silver paint STR kanji across the deserted desks, shimmering softly in the night. His voice was soft, almost distant. No, but I will be. A beat of silence, an unspoken agreement, a fragile hope. You? Izuku asked quietly, eyes still on the moonlit glow. Same, Katsuki replied, voice steady but layered with something softer, relief, reassurance, the barest hint of vulnerability. They sat there, backs pressed against the cold chalkboard, watching the silver spill across the room, an unspoken promise hanging in the quiet air, that even in the darkness, they could find a way to be okay. Then, softly, Izuku broke the silence, voice gentle and sure, filled with quiet conviction. I think we are going to be okay. Katsuki nodded, eyes meeting his in the dim, moonlit glow. Yeah, I think we will. And in that moment, simple, fragile, hopeful, they found strength in each other, amid the remnants of chaos and the quiet promise of dawn. Final group chat, Class 1A plus Izuku, title, Chaos and Therapy, Kaminari, Toga and Uraraka are holding hands. Midoriya and Katsuki are definitely dating Ida. I can finally update the seating chart. Uraraka. Thank you for not arresting my girlfriend beverage box problem_child. We are not done Kaminari, a beverage box problem underscore child, but we survived. Jiru, and we are still us. Epilogue. 6 months later, the school was rebuilt. The walls, once scarred and cracked by the storm of chaos, now stood tall again, fresh paint covering the fractures, windows replaced with clear glass that reflected the bright sunlight streaming through. Yet, beneath the renewed surface, faint scars remained, lines and cracks etched into the foundation, silent witnesses to the destruction endured. The halls echoed with the muted footsteps of students and staff, a steady rhythm of life reclaiming its space. The air carried a faint scent of fresh paint and new wood, mingling with a lingering trace of smoke and burnt earth, remnants of a war fought and survived. But so did the people, the resilient, battered, unbreakable people who refused to be defined by their scars. Their eyes, sharp and tired, held stories of loss and hope, of pain and renewal. They moved forward, step by step, carrying the weight of yesterday, but looking ahead with cautious optimism. Among them, Izuku Midoriya, a third year, entered the lecture hall, a quiet, deliberate presence. A pair of reading glasses rested on his nose, not because he needed them, but because they felt like a small act of normalcy, a symbol of his quiet resolve. He paused at the front, surveying the room, a space once filled with chaos, now calm and expectant. The soft hum of murmuring students, the faint scratch of pens on paper, the distant hum of ventilation, these sounds grounded him, anchoring him in the present. With measured, deliberate movements, he approached the board, his fingertips brushing over the smooth surface as he prepared to speak. The chalk squeaked softly as he wrote the syllabus, an outline of rules, lessons, and hopes for a new beginning. Then, turning to face the room, he spoke, voice steady but carrying the weight of everything he had endured. "My name is Midoriya Izuku," he said softly, voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had already fought battles no one could see. He paused, eyes scanning the eager, attentive faces before him, young, uncertain, yet brave enough to sit here, ready to learn. "I'll be your ethics instructor." The words hung in the air, simple but profound, an anchor, a promise, a quiet declaration of purpose. He smiled then, sharp and tired, tinged with a hint of something darker, an unspoken reminder of the battles fought and the scars carried beneath the surface. His gaze was steady and unflinching, a mirror to the resilience of everyone in the room. "Let's begin." And in that moment, under the bright, unforgiving light of a new dawn, Izuku stepped into his future, carrying the weight of the past but with hope in his heart. The scars remained, yes, but so did the people. And that was enough to face whatever came next. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Deku Had Reality Warping Quirk. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to Whispic for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on archiveofourown.org for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.